Thank you for listening to the BJJ podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BJJ podcast. This week we have episode 315, and this week is a topic episode. Basically, how to get 1 month of training in 1 day. So 30 days for the price of one, which sounds impossible, but we're going to talk about it and see if it can be done. Miracles can happen. And as always, well, I guess not for the last couple weeks, I'm here with my good buddies, Joe Thomas, and I guess we could call him an acquaintance, Byron Jabara. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. I'm excited. I don't know what kind of secrets you guys have in your back pocket, but I'm thinking after this conversation, I'm only going to have to go to jiu-jitsu once a month. So I'm excited about this. Awesome. How you doing, Byron?
You're already on the wrong page. Yeah, Gary, it is normal to have you back. So.
Yeah, it's been a while, I think.
No, it's good to have you back, and I hope you had a great time. And sounds like you have a little bit of a upper chest thing going as far as cold or pneumonia or something, but you're here. You're sounding better, I guess, than you did a few days ago.
Thank you.
And you're a trooper. So, yeah, good to have you back on the show. We'll miss you. We missed your wit and wisdom coming from that side of the phone.
From what I've been reading on the interwebs, those were some of the worst listened to shows ever. And what happened is, or what I heard is, most of the time they listened right up to the introduction and found out I wasn't there and dropped off.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, guys, for hurting the show.
Yeah, the intro music played, the little Cleveland from Family Guy came on and talked, and then as soon as we introed it and Gary wasn't there. That's why we had you start this, Gary.
I have to start it. But, I've been gone for a couple weeks, and actually almost 3 weeks, because 1 week I had to cut it short due to technical difficulties, so it's been a while. But during that time I've been gone, as Byron said, I've been on a 10-day vacation. I've been battling pneumonia. I've had all sorts of weird stuff happen, but I also have an off-the-mat lesson. I took a vacation down to Hilton Head, South Carolina for 10 days with a family and in-laws, and it was basically a family get-together where we had, 20 so odd people from the in-law side there, and we do it every year and have a blast. And this year, I've been going there for like 20 years, and I have never been kayaking there. And actually, I've never been kayaking in my life. I've done canoeing, but never kayaking. And every year I want to kayak, and one thing leads to another, and we never do it. But this time I tried to talk everybody into going kayaking one day to go see some dolphins and stingrays and stuff like that. But nobody wanted to do it, but my daughter. So me and my daughter went out and did a 2-hour tour, with a guide, which I think made it so much better because he took us to all the cool spots and actually, told us about all the different animals we'd see and, all about the island. But we had a blast. It was, to be honest, out of the 20 years going to Hilton Head, that's the most fun I've ever had down there. And, I've had a lot of good times. So I came back and everybody asked how it was and, seeing my daughter, light up, telling everybody. So then my father-in-law decided, hey, let's do this again tomorrow. Let's go. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. We'll go as a big group. And, so we started asking around and everybody was excited to do it. And, my father-in-law asked me if I'd call up and make the reservation. So I think we were supposed to have like 16 people go. And so we make a reservation and everybody's asking me about it and this and that, and told them how much good time I had. And then when it comes time to go, about half the people dropped out. People were afraid they haven't kayaked, which I had never kayaked before. Just little things, hey, I might get tired. It's hot out. A dolphin might tip over my kayak, all sorts of different things. But the people who went had also never been kayaking. And I mean, we had people from 12 years old to 85 years old going in our group. And we did it with a guide again, and we all had a blast. And when we came back, everybody that went was having a blast. And to be honest, beforehand, it kind of almost like I was leading this charge. So I was thinking, I didn't know how much fun everybody would have. And I was actually afraid that people were going to get out there and get tired from kayaking or the sun and not have a good time. And then I was going to be to blame. That's kind of what was going through my head. But everybody who did it came back and said it was like the best time they've ever had also on Hilton Head, which, like I said, we've been going forever. And, I'm going to go back to, Byron's, 6 games for BJJ, the Nike method, just do it. I told you I've been wanting to go before years, and I didn't do it for some reason. I didn't pull the trigger. Just like I've told the story about the first time I tried to do jiu-jitsu. I called up the instructor, found out, where to go, what time the class was, and I got up there and, I saw some people in the parking lot, and I drove by. I didn't just do it. I just drove by. Luckily, I did come back and try jiu-jitsu the next week. But I was just thinking if, I've never kayaked before, I didn't know if I would do well at it, but who cares? You got somebody to teach you, just like going into a jiu-jitsu class. There's going to be people to teach you. There's going to be people to help you out. Byron and Joe always talk about how to be a good teammate and help the new person. But, I just want to say, just do it. Step out of your comfort zone, try some new things, and the majority of the time you'll end up liking it. Sometimes you won't like it, but hey, at least you tried it. Just do it, the Nike method.
Man, Gary, that was awesome. The first thing that came to mind while you were telling that story is how much you and Stephen Kesting are alike. Because he's going on a new trip and went on one too, just like him. So congratulations, man.
Same thing.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing is I've been reading about Stephen here, and while I was kayaking, I was like, man, I'm out here kayaking 2 hours and at a leisurely pace, looking at some, seabirds and stingrays and dolphins and shrimp. And, Stephen, he's battling the wind. He's trying to go as far as he can each day. And I felt how my rear delts were getting sore. And, the first day I got sunburned like crazy on my nose. And I'm just sitting there thinking, man, what I'm doing is a country club style compared to what Stephen Kesting's doing. But it just makes me realize how tough. And, not that I didn't realize how tough what Stephen Kesting's doing, but just going out there and spending, 4 to 6 hours or whatever kayaking, and as tired as I was, I can't imagine what he's going through and doing it day after day after day with limited resources, limited food, and just eating a whole bunch of almond balls or those date balls he's making. But Stephen Kesting is a beast. He's a hero of mine.
Gary, I don't mean to get all Freudian on you or anything, but it kind of occurs to me.
Talking about balls.
No, what I'm talking about is Stephen Kesting's been making these big date balls that are calorie rich that he's eating while he's going on his trip.
That's Freudian, Joe. Let's hear this.
we know that.
We know
Byron, I'm not trying to make fun of Gary right now.
Just do it. It's okay.
Yeah, just do it.
He's here today.
No, but Gary.
Yes.
You say you've gone here for a long time, and for the last couple of years you've thought about doing this. And I'm wondering if subliminally you've been following Stephen Kesting, and I wonder if that didn't inspire you to do this.
That's a good point. Maybe it really could have. And what's kind of weird is I did it this time. The last couple of times I thought about it, just didn't pull the trigger. The crazy thing is I did it this time, and I really wasn't feeling great. I'm still towards the end of my sickness, during that vacation, and which, it's harder to get out and do something that active where I could have just stayed on the beach and played a little bocce ball or, jumped in the waves. So, but yeah, that's probably true, Joe. It probably really is.
So the great story, Gary, I'm glad you found this new thing that you enjoy doing, and I'm sure you'll be doing that next year, get a bigger group.
Actually, I'm thinking of going to buy me a couple of kayaks to go around here.
Yeah. So, okay, that is a different note. We rescue people out of the river all the time that end up way over their skill level. So just learn where is safe in our waters and stick to those areas, Gary, because it can get pretty dangerous pretty quick here in Wichita because our water is inconsistent.
Life jackets, Byron.
That's
and
also good.
I'm not dumb enough to go down the Cowskin Creek after a big rainstorm.
There you go. Yeah, you're smarter than I thought.
Yeah.
So another thing, you mentioned that you had a big group wanting to go, and then a lot of them backed out. Like, possibly they thought you were not going to be going 2 days in a row. And like, okay, this is a day where, Gary's already done it, and it'll be without him. And then they see you. Oh, he's actually doing this again? Well, you know what? I think maybe I'm a little sore. Crickets on that one.
Crickets.
Go ahead. Okay, that one flopped.
Even the dude who owned the place is like, man, what, you're back again? And I was like, man, I had so much fun. I talked some more people into coming.
Nice.
Yeah.
Man, that's good. I'm glad you had a good time on your trip. And
yeah. If you ever go down to Hilton Head, I mean, this is they're not sponsoring us, but check out Salt Marsh Paddles. Great place, paddle sports or something like that. Salt Marsh Paddles. Good time.
All right. I see Salt Marsh Paddle Tours.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds good.
They treated you good, and that's nice to hear.
Yes. Yep. Great time.
And we wanted to treat you good, especially if you're in your first year of jiu-jitsu. We have an audiobook called, I should have done something more clever, Your First Year of BJJ. It's about 2.5 hours long. It covers all the things from just starting jiu-jitsu and what to expect when you walk in to getting through your first month, and then what type of things you should be focusing on and working on and getting you past a couple of hurdles that you're likely to encounter, all the way up to competing if that's something that you want to do. So it's kind of a helpful guidebook. Even if you're 6 months in already, there'll be some great stuff in there for you. The money goes to help support the podcast here. It's $11.99. It's about 2.5 hours long. Check in the show notes. There'll be a link. That's for you. Joe, what do we have this week for the quote, my friend?
My friend, we have a very interesting quote. You got to go down a lot of wrong roads to find the right one. And that's by Bob Parsons. He's the founder at godaddy.com, just an all-around general entrepreneur. Before we get into the quote, I want to say that I think all of us have been following Stephen Kesting on his, and since there I sent Byron error in the text, or he made the error. But Byron, you typed in our show notes, you got to go down a lot of wrong rapids to find the right one.
Man, I saw that.
So I think we're thinking a little bit too much about canoeing. Either I sent you it with an error, or you made an error. But anyway,
I saw that, and I thought you said it wrong, Joe. I was like, man, this is perfect for talking about Stephen Kesting and my kayaking trip.
No, I may have made a typo when I sent it to Byron, but
I'll take full responsibility for the rapids. Hey, that's now our quote.
Is you got to go down long roads to find the right ones. And part of the reason I wanted to bring this quote today is because I like what it's intended to mean, but I also think there's a flip side of the coin that we should talk about. I think what it's intended to mean is, like, if you just spent a year doing rubber guard and then realize that that's not the direction your jiu-jitsu needs to go, it's easy to beat yourself up over that, and like get discouraged. I wasted all that time. But the reality is, any long journey you take, you're going to take some wrong roads, and that's just part of it. And so you should take some comfort, I guess, in that. And also, if you subscribe to this philosophy, it gives you the confidence to try different things. You a lot with, well, should I try adding this to my game? I don't know. It might be a mistake. It might not work. Just go ahead and try it. If it's the wrong road, you'll get back on the right path soon enough. So I think that's the intended meaning of this quote. But I think the flip side is, at some point in your journey, you don't want to spend a lot of time on the wrong roads. And think about taking a road trip. Like if I said I'm going to drive from here to Wichita, Kansas, I'm down in Louisiana right now, I could just kind of wing it and just drive up there, and eventually I'd get there, but I'd take a lot of wrong roads along the way. But if I use some tools, a program on my phone, the GPS, there's all kinds of tools I can use to minimize the wrong turns that I take. And so I think in jiu-jitsu, you shouldn't be afraid to take a wrong turn now and then. You shouldn't beat yourself up if you went down a wrong path, but you can take tools to minimize those wrong roads. You get a good relationship with your coach, ask him from time to time, how am I doing? Am I focusing on the right things? There's online resources you can use. There's all kinds of tools you can use to minimize the time that you spend going down wrong roads. So I think both sides of the coin are worth thinking about.
Yeah, Joe, sometimes I think it's not bad if you just took off from Louisiana with no GPS, no smartphone, to try to find your way to Wichita. It may be wrong roads to get there as quick as possible, but, we always talk about jiu-jitsu as in a marathon. I just think about if I take the main roads, I'm going to be going on a highway. I'm going to go through the major cities. I'm going to see the same restaurants over and over. I take some of the side roads. I'm going to see Joe's Crab Shack. I'm going to see Billy Bob's, Catfish Dinner. I'm going to see a whole bunch of different stuff and, different scenery, and hopefully broaden my mind there too. So, I don't know if there's, a right answer or a wrong answer, but I'm that guy. Like when I'm traveling, I would almost rather take the back roads. I know it takes a little bit longer, but I kind of like the differences I see. I know I've talked about this before, but, when I drive to work, I always try to take different ways to work. It may take me a little bit longer, but I see different stuff. I see different people jogging. One way I go past a local jiu-jitsu club. Another way I go past a local pickleball court. I can always tell you if I take this road, who I'm going to see jogging in the morning. So, I'll take another road to see somebody else jogging.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
see somebody else, not that dude.
Basically, I'm a stalker. So that's what I'm trying to tell you.
No, Gary, I love what you just said. I didn't even really think about that before, but
yeah.
There's kind of two different types of people. There's one person who is driving down the road and there's some road construction and they got a detour and they don't take it quite right and they get on the wrong street and they get to work 10 minutes late and they say I got lost. They might say I took the wrong road to get to work, and other people will just say I took a different road to get to work.
Yeah.
It's not wrong. It's just different. I saw, like you said, you see different things. Man, I think that's a good way to look.
Yeah. So, Gary, the life lesson reminds me of this, and to take a lot of wrong roads to get the right one. You could have kayaked and disliked it, and then maybe next year you would have done some sea fishing and disliked it, and then maybe you tried, I don't know, spear fishing and you loved it. And so is it worth the price of doing a couple of things that didn't turn out that great to find something as fun as kayaking?
I think so. Maybe I found kayaking and maybe I won't do anything else. But, let's say I tried spearfishing and didn't like it. Now I don't have that experience, and I'm a creature, I'll probably stick with kayaking, next time too, instead of trying spearfishing or something else. But I always think that even if you don't like something, I look at, my career, in the business world that, I've worked with other companies and, maybe it wasn't the best move at that time. And, there were a lot of things I didn't like about these companies I went with. But, now later on in my career, I can look back at them and think about how much I learned from that particular crappy job or from this particular crappy boss. And, so I do learn I think I learn a lot of stuff from taking the wrong road. And, I think it helps me in the long run. So just like I personally believe mistakes are great as long as we think about it and figure out how not to keep doing it over and over again. I mean, we're going to make mistakes, but let's sit down, figure out why we made a mistake, why we took the wrong road, and see what we can learn from it.
Yeah, great quote and from Bob Parsons. I Googled Bob Parsons, and his net worth is like $2.5 billion. And
so he's a little bit richer than you.
So if he wants to support the podcast, we'd probably find a way to have that happen. And that reminded me of just an interesting fact, which is un-jiu-jitsu related, but I think it's a good visual, and if you could learn something in a good way, it's like, wow, that really explains it well. You could maybe take something to jiu-jitsu, and if you could explain it in a better way, it'll make it easier for you to teach jiu-jitsu. So $1 million is a lot of, well, if it's $1 million, that's a lot. $1 billion, that's a lot of money too. But let's compare those two. So 1 million seconds is about 11 days. So that's like, you can wrap your head around that, right? That's how long a million seconds is. So let's look at how long is a billion seconds? It's like 31 years. Like those don't compare. Like a billionaire is not the same as a millionaire. They're not even close. And so it's a powerful visual. Taking something that's like kind of abstract, and if you could somehow do something with that, with how you teach jiu-jitsu, to create powerful visuals, and people will remember whatever you're talking about. So anyway, I thought that was a neat fact. I feel like you guys are checking my math, but it's fairly accurate. I'm trying to, but I went down the wrong path. I Googled the wrong thing. You just Google how long is a billion seconds. Anyway, we got something better to talk about than $1 billion. How to get a month's worth of training in just a day. And this sounds a bit like, what are these guys going to be talking about today? This isn't even real. But we all experience this from time to time. You show up on the mat and you learn something that's so great for what you're doing. It's like the same equivalent of training and learning that you would have got in a month. It just in one day. It should have been just a couple of minutes or a little conversation about something, but it's a day worth of training, a month worth of training in just a day or a session. And I thought this would be a fun topic to talk about. I know I've experienced this. If you guys experience it, I'd like to hear your stories about maybe a couple times and kind of get the ball rolling on that.
So basically, you're talking about having an epiphany, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to say that.
That's one way to put it. I've had them on occasion, and sometimes it strikes me while I'm learning something, while at that moment, like, wow, that's going to revolutionize what I'm doing right now. Sometimes it catches me a half hour later, like during open rolling portion of class, like all of a sudden, wow, this thing that we just were working on, this thing that just clicked in my head is really making a big difference. And usually it comes there's two separate times where I might get it. It's if I just so happen to be in 3 or 4 classes sort of in a row where they're different instructors, but they're teaching a similar thing. So I'm getting a very broad look at one thing. Maybe 4 classes in a row I go to 4 different people teaching, and they're all working on the Kimura from closed guard or something. And the other time is some just go completely out, and I visit a school halfway across the country I'm traveling or something, and just see something new or a new way to approach things. And those are the 2 times I usually have, quote unquote, an epiphany.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at that. For me, it's always been, maybe not always, but it seems like it's always been something that is relevant to my game and just a little different. So it's not a major change. I'm not learning the entire Berimbolo system in that one session. What I'm learning is a way to finish my guillotine a little better, or a way, to secure the armbar and prevent an escape. And that for sure can be worth a month of training that what I would normally, the ground I would make. And it would be in that one day. The problem is, a lot of times it just happens randomly. And I would like to share ways, and I think we have some good ones here, to increase the odds of that happening. And so you get more of those happening in the course of a year than less. Because if you go a whole year and every day is exactly one day worth of training, and you learn, you add, 5 points of jiu-jitsu skill, that's not bad. But we want to have some big jumps in there as well, because it feels very rewarding to have that. So I asked my wife, Becky, I said, have you ever experienced this before, this big jump in your training? And the first person she mentioned was Gary.
Well, I paid her.
Well, Gary, she's going to buy me dinner with that, so checkmate. So she'd been working on the Kimura. She learned it quite a while ago, and it wasn't like clicking for her. Her closed guard Kimura was kind of tough to finish, and she really had given up on the top Kimura because it would end up in a battle of strength. And her 2 arms were often not strong enough to pull off the Kimura against the one person. So she doesn't compete. She's grappling almost always with guys and who are always stronger than her, and she's trying to break this grip and make this Kimura happen. It just doesn't happen. So if I keep telling her, if you're competing with women your own size and strength and that sort of thing, a lot of these techniques would be a lot easier, but you're not. So it's really she's just training. So Gary showed her a way to finish the Kimura and kind of fall back and use your body more and use your legs to get the arm pulled out there and control it. And it was a night and day difference. She became very interested in this technique. It fit well with what she was wanting to do. She was comfortable with the Kimura grips. She was comfortable with the setup. She had kind of written it off as I can get to here, and then I can't finish the technique. And then Gary comes along and says, try this. And boom, it was just the missing piece of the puzzle, and now the puzzle is complete. Jiu-jitsu is never really complete, but it's just that missing thing that she really needed to get a lot more Kimuras finished while she's rolling. And that was a big one for her as far as a big gain, and probably, you could say a whole day. It was probably a 10-minute little chat you had with her, and you probably demonstrated a couple times and back and forth. But 10 minutes versus a whole month of her going and just working on her normal stuff. So that was a great thing that she picked up there.
And I think that's kind of what you just mentioned here a minute ago. It's never something huge. It seems like it's always just a small, minute detail. I mean, not necessarily small, but a detail that we're missing somewhere that can really change something. And I kind of talked about this before, but my back control has been okay, nothing spectacular, and I got dominated by one guy who took my back, and I really couldn't escape it. I always thought I was pretty good at escaping. And I was like, man, I need to get better at back control. So I started working back control to try to get better. And, I'd spent like a month working on it. And, I was getting a little bit better. Nothing spectacular. Nothing really jumped out. And, Byron, your seminar on back control, you showed a couple of things of using your legs. And for some reason, it was basic stuff, but I just it wasn't clicking to me. I was using my leg in a different way. And, I feel like it's night and day, same thing. Something I was working on and I guess it's really not a minute detail, but a couple details shown to me, makes a big difference. And, there's more than one way to, finish a move and this and that. Everybody's got a preferred way. I mean, we all got different body types, different levels of flexibility and strength, and different things work for us. But, what you showed really worked for me. And, I felt like that was a time I took a big jump. And it's, I don't know, like you're asking how to do it. For me, it almost felt like a stroke of luck that I just happened to be talk about that, but it's keeping your ears open, listening, pay attention, asking questions, to people, knowledgeable people, and people who are good at that position to help me out.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, some of these are just luck. Somebody who just says something, and it clicks with what you're doing at the right time. And it's like, boom, that's okay. That makes sense. and man, that really feels good. But you don't want to miss. You don't want to miss that luck.
You
got to be there.
Yeah, that luck. I mean, Joe talks about it all the time. Be there. That luck happens for going to the seminar. That luck happens to show up for a class. That luck happens, to ask a question to a teammate. Being there, leads to that luck happening.
I could think about Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was going to say I thought a lot about that too, because I told you guys there's sort of two scenarios where I've found that I have an epiphany now and then, but stepping back and looking at them all overall, I think they also have another thing in common. It happens a lot when I'm getting a lot of mat time in, and I think part of it might just be scientific. Remember, we had Daniel Coyle on here a while ago that did the talent code, and he talked about myelin. And I would do a disservice to explain how it works, but as you repeat a task and you do it correctly, and then you repeat a task and do it correctly again, things are happening in your brain that are cementing that neural pathway. And it's like if you took 10 golf lessons, stretched out over a 10-year period of time, there's too much time in between. You would probably be no better at golf at the end of those 10 years than you were when you started. But if you took 2 or 3 golf lessons in a month, then that myelin, it builds on the one lesson after the next. And so honestly, I wonder if just mat time is we say it all the time, that's the magic bullet, right?
Yeah, and you're talking about myelin, and that makes sense. I was also just thinking about, keeping your ears open while we're rolling, paying attention. And, I'm thinking if I get more mat time, I'm going to be in better shape. If I show up once a month, I'm going to be tired. And when you're tired, you're not listening as much. Your head's down, you're taking deep breaths. And, some of the times you're just like, man, I need a water break. What time is it? Time to leave yet? And I've seen myself in those situations. But, when my cardio's, on point, my myelin's clicking, I'm probably more apt to learn stuff.
Yeah. So I'm going to push back against this here, guys, to see what you guys say.
Well,
so,
we know it's going to be weak if you're going to be pushing back.
Matt, what I'm thinking here as mat time, that's a month of training. That's normal training. It's what your barometer is. Now, we all have different gauges or different hardware that we're working with or software that we're working with jiu-jitsu. And some of us in a month get way better than somebody else in a month. But we're really wanting to make you a month worth of training in what would be just a day of your training. So mat time is just what is your normal miles per hour. And so we want to get a month worth of that, a month worth of improvement versus if you went to class a normal amount of times a week and got that. And I agree with Joe. I'm not trying to say that this doesn't work, but like these happen naturally. Like we're learning something, and something you learn is like a big deal, and it just happened unexpectedly, and it happened somewhere in that month, and it's like boom. And then you might go a couple more months, maybe a year, and then boom, another thing happened. Rolly Delgado came to Wichita and showed some details on a footlock in the opening part of the seminar. So I did not even the whole seminar. In the opening part of the seminar, it changed my footlock game, if I could have just been attacking feet for an entire month and never got that far as what he showed in the first 15 minutes of the seminar, like that was a big change.
But it goes back to showing up.
Yeah,
if you weren't there that day, you would have missed it.
Exactly right. But
I get what you're saying, Byron, but I still think just anecdotally and coincidentally, I get epiphanies more often when I'm having a concentrated period of training. I think that might be a key to having an epiphany.
Okay, that makes sense.
Both of the Wichita events have been sort of good for me in the same way. But you know what I do before I come to Wichita? I try and get in some extra classes so I'm ready when I get to Wichita. And then when I get to Wichita, I get like hours of training in a 2-day period. And so I just think naturally I'm just much more likely to have an epiphany in that environment than when I'm in a go to class 2 or 3 times a week for 3 or 4 months in a row type of thing. I think that's kind of a key.
But if you spent the entire time that weekend just rolling, you might get an epiphany. I'd be interested to see and people learn at different places.
Yeah.
You might get more, you might get less.
I agree with you 100%, Byron. It's a bit of knowledge that really is the epiphany, but they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I just think that.
But ways to get that epiphany, though, Byron, you're asking about if you just rolled, would you get it? And that's, I think, where ways to get that epiphany. I mean, we talked about showing up, but asking questions. You're rolling with somebody who's got good back control. Let's take my example. Hey, what are you doing? Why is your back control so good? And, maybe that epiphany will come when that guy explains something. Let's take Joe's, thing. He's coming to Wichita and training with people he doesn't train with all the time. They're going to train a little bit differently. They're going to explain stuff a little bit differently. So, he may ask Jake Fox how to control the back like that, and Jake explains something a little bit differently, and it just hits. It just, oh, man, that's it. That's the one thing I've been missing.
Yep, and coincidence and just good luck do play a role in this. I'm guessing that Byron and none of the other coaches at the Wichita event kind of planned what they were doing, like that they didn't coordinate, but each of them had some form of leg drag in what they were doing. And when I came out of Wichita, that's the area of my game that was, kind of deep. And yeah, some incidents of good luck.
Yeah, and Joe, you were talking about the instructors there, Byron, and them coordinating. And you would know Byron does not coordinate if you've ever hung out with him enough.
Watch me dance.
Seen the way he dresses.
Punch thrown and delivered square in my big nose. So definitely these big aha moments happen while you're rolling. Sometimes it drastically increases if the training partner is being productive in the roll. And I just remembered just the other day I was rolling with one of our purple belts named Matt, and we have several, so that doesn't really narrow it down. But anyway, athletic guy, and he got side control on me, and he's got a great side control. I'm in a bit of trouble. That's okay, not a big deal. It's very tight, and I'm squirming, and I'm working to keep my elbows safe and stuff. And he grabbed my wrist, and he grabbed my hand, like kind of across the knuckles, and I pulled my arm in quickly to avoid the wrist lock. But I didn't feel any pressure following my hand. Like, I go, "Were you trying to wrist lock me?" He said, "No." I'm like, "Oh." And so we finished the roll, and I don't remember how it happened, but whatever. And I said, "You should wrist lock from there." And then I showed him, and it was just like a piece in his game because he's got this crazy good side control. He's really good at controlling the elbows. And the next roll, he looks up at me, and he's like, "I got one." Like, wow. And he wasn't being bragging about it to in front of the other guy, but like, it worked. And hopefully, if he wants
now there's an epiphany. If
he wants to push this, and he can go home and forget about it, or he could try to take that step and learn a little more about wrist locks and come in the next day and be excited about getting the side control position and working on these wrist locks. And that's where maybe the difference is. And if I would have just showed him that, and that would have been the last roll, he might have forgot about it altogether. So maybe a combination of rolling with some feedback and then getting to try it again. That's a good way to roll as far as learning while you roll, which is another topic episode we had not that long ago.
Yep. Well, Byron, I like what you said. You can't just, you showed me a couple little tricks for a back control. And, it changed my, I'm like, oh, man, this is going to be great. But I could have left it at that and went back to working Kimuras and, my straight ankle lock and, got nothing out of that. And I think if you roll with me now, you'll see I'm working back. I'll pass up a Kimura and ankle lock just to take the back, just to work my back. I want to get in that position. And so, I mean, that's a key right there, too. I mean, once that gift is given to you, we've got to water that gift. We've got to, nurture it. We've got to grow it. And if you don't, that gift is like return to Walmart. So, let's don't return the gift. Let's nurture it.
Never give Gary a gift that's food related because he'll water it. He gets all kind of watered down, like cake. He has some water that birthday cake, and it.
I'll eat the birthday cake and drink some water. So there you go.
But I like that, Gary. That's a good way to explain it. If it fits your game, you kind of owe it yourself to jump on that and take it to the next level. So I think we've all experienced these type of things. I think another way to do this is the positional sparring.
Yes.
And this could be, I think this is a little easier in helping you in areas where you're having trouble. And it could be, I'm having trouble finishing my triangle, or I'm having trouble not getting armbarred every time somebody passes my guard. Or so those are kind of opposites. One of them's offense, one's defense. But positional sparring for 10 minutes in a triangle is probably more time in a triangle than you would typically get in several rolls.
In a year.
Yeah, maybe it depends who you're grappling and how good you are at avoiding triangles. But like, if you think about it, how many minutes are you fighting in a triangle in a night of jiu-jitsu? I don't know. Everybody's number is different. But if you put yourself there 10 minutes on purpose, that's 10 minutes of deliberate training.
Byron, how many seconds would that be?
Incalculable. It's like a billion, I think. It's like 30-some years.
31.7 years.
Well played. I guess I can't bring up time anymore.
Yeah, but you talk about positional sparring, and we have incredible guests on here every week. Big time guests, and so many of them talk about positional sparring. And when you've got guys that are at the upper echelon and talking about how great positional sparring is, there it is. Keep your ears open. They just, they just gave us a gift. Now it's our turn to water it, to nurture it. See, I'm going back down that path again, Byron.
You're just a gardener, Gary.
Yep.
So I think we can look at this as we've talked a bit about some of these days happening, and I don't think anyone would say that didn't happen. Like, Rolly Delgado came in and taught a footlock seminar, and the first 10 minutes of it was more than worth of me training and making up how to finish the footlocks from watching YouTube videos. Like, that's real. Like, that's more training in that 10 minutes than a month of me playing around with it would have been. And same with our other examples we've had. But how can we create these is what I was trying to think about for this show. And part of it, so I think we could break it down from like what you're doing before training, what you do during training, and what you do after training. And look at ways to try to set up to where you get more of these days in a year than less of them than than what you deserve or what you would typically get. Because, I mean, we all have these days, but if you can get 10 of them this year instead of 3, that's clearly better. So before training, guys, what would you think would be happening, or what would you be doing before you hit the mats to be having a great day to make this possible?
Well, I think when I have a narrower focus, I'm more likely to have an epiphany. Like I said, oftentimes I have them when I attend several classes where the same material is being taught, and something along that path just clicks. And so I can sort of bring that on my own. The school where I go, they tell you what we're going to be doing each day of the week. So if I want to be working on my guard game, I can look at the schedule and I can days where we're working on the guard game. And then I can supplement that by watching tutorials on playing guard, specifically maybe something I'm working on. So that way I've narrowed the focus, and I think that's definitely one way you can increase the odds of this happening.
Yeah, I like that, Joe. When your focus is narrower and you're studying a little bit, you know what's coming in, makes a big difference. Byron, you're talking about before training. One thing I was thinking of is just your overall health and well-being. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, but if it's easier if you're in shape, kind of like to take information in. If I eat a big pizza right before I come to jiu-jitsu, I'm probably not going to feel as good. And when I don't feel as good, I don't retain information as good. So, Byron, you brought this up a lot of times, but days you're training, have a water bottle with you. Stay hydrated. That's a very important part of jiu-jitsu is to be hydrated. If I know I'm training, try to eat a better meal and don't eat a big Chipotle burrito bowl right before you go. Anything to make your body better, I think you have a better chance learning and retaining information. Good night's sleep.
If you don't eat a big burrito bowl right before you go to class, I'm sure your teammates appreciate that as well.
See, and when your teammates are happy, they're going to be more apt to be that good training partner who's going to give you and be receptive to your questions.
So I think of this whole concept as like priming yourself to have a great day on the mats, and you guys are right on it as far as anything I can think of.
We know we're right.
Diet, you want to feel good. So if it's altering your diet for that day that you're training, or maybe even that week, or getting ready, getting stretched out, it could be, maybe you don't lift weights on the same day you train. Whatever it is, if you're expecting to hit this big aha moment during rolling, you need to have your body ready to go when you step on the mats to roll. Maybe, it could be the opposite. You could be tired and find something big that is really easy to do that when you're tired. But typically, I would say definitely show up and have your body with you. And then Joe's talking about, focusing on something and being mentally ready. Yeah, if you know they're going to be working butterfly guard with an overhook or something like that, do a little research on that. Maybe talk to a couple of your teammates about it, and be ready when you get there. So when they start showing this, you have that understanding of what's going on, and you're able to learn a little bit of the better details that if you were just like, okay, this is the butterfly hook, or this is why I'm overhooking here. If you knew that coming in, it's going to be an easier class for you, and you're going to get more learning versus less.
I think that's especially important, Byron, when you're going to a seminar. Because you're paying good money to have somebody teach you something very specific, and if you get there, you're lost during the setup. Man, you just wasted your money and blew an opportunity. So make sure you're familiar with what's going to be taught and ready for the seminar.
Good point, Joe. Hey, Byron, going back, you mentioned stretching too. I thought that was a good one that we didn't really touch on. If you stretch out and, do your mobility drills, there's a better chance you're going to less injuries, which me and Joe have been talking about. You're going to be on the more time you're on the mat. And, you were talking about your diet. Like, Byron, I know you've really worked on trying to eat healthy. And, I know you've mentioned a lot of times you like unsalted nuts. You like to eat nuts for breakfast. So, and you said that's made a big difference for you. So, I know you really take a fascination to those nuts.
Well, and my wife just got a new kitchen appliance that does all kinds of neat. It makes and it makes soups and it does extracts. And so, Byron, I can send you some nut butter if you want some.
I keep my nuts out of any machines or anything like that. Just normal, guys. It's a clean diet.
You don't like salty nuts, So I know you've told me that.
And you guys are. We got the three amigos back. This is good to have Gary back on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think you really like it too much, Byron.
Gary, we got done with one episode and we're like, this went really fast. We just stayed on topic the whole time.
Nobody derailed you.
But it is more fun getting off topic a little bit, and it's a good diet tip, Some nuts, lightly salted, if none at all, and
a handful or two of nuts every morning.
Yeah, that's a good breakfast, Gary. I know you're giving me a hard time, but that is a high protein breakfast that primes the pump, ready for that day of jiu-jitsu that may be in the afternoon or evening. It's a good way to start.
Yep. Oh, it definitely primes the pump.
Dang, I put that one on a tee for you, Gary. So you show up to class, you're feeling good, you're not sick, you're not injured, you're ready to perform. What's happening on these days that you're having these great training days? What's happening during your roles? What's happening during instruction portion? What's happening during positional sparring? How could we create better training days?
I really think one, and I can go back to myself. It's a good training partner. Every one of us, you can talk about some of your favorite training partners, and your favorite training partners are guys you experiment things with, you ask questions, and Byron, you introduced me to Cody Carrillo, and you always kept talking about that I would love training with him, and how he's so fun to train with. And I have to admit, once you got me training with him and rolled with him, that would be a person that I would have an epiphany rolling with. He's a fun person to roll with. He's great to ask questions to. He will let you try some things. He's not just gonna, go for himself. You need a training partner that'll give and take, who'll work with you. And, I know you talked about that a couple episodes ago, Joe, with, a training partner that'll really work with you, will help you out.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Gary. In fact, I had two rolls the other night with some young guys that both could whoop me if they wanted, and one of them basically did. And it was just pressure the whole time. I'm just kind of surviving and defending, and it was a tough roll. And then the other guy, who was actually a better grappler, higher belt, nice guy, and he just kept making space and sort of making me move, sort of making Nike method and just do it. And he's giving me opportunities to try stuff. And good training partner. I just felt like I grow a lot during those roles, and able to play with some things and not afraid to try things. And if you're rolling against somebody that can crush you in side control the whole time, and when they get side control, they generally do, I don't think those rolls are quite as productive as when you roll with somebody that's going to do a little give and take with you.
That's a good one, Joe. And it's just, it could be too overwhelming for you to be learning. And occasionally somebody will roll with me and they're like, hey, smash me. I really want to, get the best out of this. I'm like, that's not the best way to train jiu-jitsu, is to have, and not that I can smash everybody who was asking me that, but like just getting annihilated doesn't necessarily mean you're learning. If you look at baseball, if you start the kids off with like a T-ball and then like a machine pitch, and then the opponent pitches, and then the opponents throw the ball 100 miles an hour. Like you ramp up to this thing, and you don't start with a pitcher firing a ball 100 miles an hour right by your face to learn how to play baseball. You start at a level that you could work with.
Byron, though, Happy Gilmore did that, and look how far he got.
And I've been told I kind of look a little like Adam Sandler, and that may not be a great thing.
You do have the same hair.
Yeah, that's one thing I got going for me. So the idea of this, and I think it's important to say, is if you're showing up today and you're trying to create the situation where you're going to get a month's worth of training in one day, it's kind of a selfish activity, and that's okay to do sometimes. The other day I trained and I rolled with, I think, like all people who had less than a year or two of grappling experience, and they were all my size or smaller. I had a great time rolling. It was fun, but a lot of those rolls weren't for me to get better at jiu-jitsu. I tried to create good training environment for them, and I just didn't happen to get to somebody who was going to put any kind of like significant pressure on me and to push me to where it would be a role more for me or for both of us. Like I'm still getting something out of these roles. I'm not saying that, but if you roll with 6 people who have just a couple of weeks of jiu-jitsu, you're not going to get a ton out of that. But so that wouldn't happen on the day that you're purposely trying to seek out a month's worth of training a day. You would try to pick out training partners that'll be good matches for you. Like you're saying with Cody, like he's good, but he's also working with you. And if he sees something for you, he'll tell you, or if he has a question about something for himself, he'll ask you. Like those are good things to do, and that creates those. But it's a little bit of a selfish act to walk in and say, today I'm going to try to get that month's worth out of this day. You're going to have to do some things that aren't like team oriented necessarily, the way that we typically operate jiu-jitsu. As in, you get 2 rolls with somebody better than you, 2 rolls with somebody who's about equal to you, and you get 2 rolls with somebody who's newer, and that kind of balances things, and everybody gets a good training session out of that. It's hard to... Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering how much room has to do with whether or not you will have one of these epiphany moments. And I guess kind of what I'm getting at is, like you said, you've got 15, almost 20 years of experience, and you're rolling with guys that have 18 months of experience, and maybe that's too big of a gap. But maybe if you've been rolling for 3 or 4 years and you walk into a room and everybody's just a year or 2 behind you and your size are smaller, that might be the perfect opportunity to have one of these epiphanies, because everybody's close enough to your skill level that they react the way you expect them to react when you attempt a technique. But they're just a little smaller, a little slower behind you, and you can try things and experiment with things. So looking at the room and devising a plan based on that would be a good idea as well.
You got to work with what you've got, and if you're in that, I'm not trying to say if you're in the jiu-jitsu room and you're the black belt teaching the white belts, that you can't have a day that is like, oh, I learned something really cool, and it's a big deal in my game, but it's going to be a little bit harder, and you really need to work hard to create that day, and it might include some off the mat training and off the mat learning that you're doing to help create that. But I'm not saying that's not going to happen. It's just harder than if you have more of a balanced arrangement. And definitely the people that are less skilled than you, they could be in this mix of big improvement day. It's just not going to be like all of it. If you're brand new working on Kimura, you don't want somebody who's your skill level or way better to work on this technique. You want somebody who's a little bit less, so that you can actually set it up and begin to work on that.
Byron, just a counterpoint, when you were talking about the big gap difference, you going against a bunch of guys who've been training 18 months. What I found a couple times is when I'm working with somebody with a big difference in skill level, much less training than me, is when I'm working with him and I have to explain stuff, like I've had epiphanies from like explaining
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
Like, yeah, like I have forgot stuff. I have, oh, wait. And I actually did that with Becky. Me and Becky, I know the time you were talking about that Becky said something, but like a month later, I was working with Becky again, and I showed a little different a grip to the hand. And it was something I forgot to show her the first time. And you know, it's something that if I'm not working, sometimes I don't use that grip all the time. And it just reiterated that I got to get back on that grip. And it was kind of like a mini epiphany of something I wasn't doing that I should have. And it was from, you know, being the person asked the question and explaining and realizing, hey, I haven't been doing this.
Yeah, that's a good way, and that's keeping your kind of eyes and ears open, and being able to learn from somebody who you're actually teaching. And it's not something you didn't know; it's just something that you hadn't thought about. And that may be a good way to think of it. If you are that black belt teaching a room full of beginners, you can still learn in that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Another way, like on the mats of training, is a seminar. I mean, that's the part where it's different. So beforehand, you're training, you're primed, you've ate, you know, a handful of nuts, or you come in ready to go, and you're healthy. Now, whether you go to normal class or you do a seminar or a private lesson, these things I think they're more likely to have an impact that's a month worth of training in a single day than just your typical class, because it's a different angle.
And one thing I want to point out about taking a seminar, and Joe hit the nail, you know, right on, or hit it, whatever that saying is.
He hit a brick.
Yeah. I did something with a nail and a brick.
Yeah, there you go. But Joe, you made a good point, and I remember you did it, you know, coming up to Rolly Delgado seminars, you did some research beforehand. And I got to admit, that is something I had never done before. And you talked about it probably 10 minutes ago, Joe, that, you know, if you don't do your research, it could be money down the drain. And when you were saying that, I have never done research before for a seminar, but I don't think I'll ever do a seminar again without doing research after, you know, listening to you. And I know you did it before the Rolly Delgado way back, you know, 2 years ago or whatever. And I remember you telling me about that, but it still didn't click in my head at that point. I was just like, oh, Joe's an overachiever. But my mind wasn't open at that point. You know, maybe it's my diet wasn't good. Maybe I didn't have enough water in, but I didn't process it that's a smart idea. I need to do that for the future. But, Joe, I think that was great advice you gave about, you know, doing a little research beforehand.
Yeah, I'm glad I converted you, Gary. I honestly believe that's key. Generally, when you go pay good money to see a seminar, they're an expert in what they're teaching, and generally teaching basics and a lot of that, how to get here. They're assuming you already know it. And if you don't, then you're in big trouble. So I can't stress enough how important I think that is.
Yeah. And just going back to that, Joe, you know, Byron, you were talking about Rolly Delgado's ankle lock seminar, and I've now done 3 ankle lock seminars with Rolly Delgado, and all of them have been, you know, epiphanies.
And you ankle lock me all the time.
Yes. But, you know, I remember the very first one I went to, and it was probably the most basic one he taught. And, you know, I learned so much from it. But I did have that background before because I did buy his app, Legal Leg Locks. And you know, I think about other seminars I've gone to, and maybe I didn't get as much out of it. And just because I wasn't as familiar, because I didn't do my homework, like Joe said. Like, even though I didn't do homework for Rolly Delgado beforehand, I had studied his, you know, Legal Leg Locks app. So I did have that background coming in. So I think that, you know, as I said earlier, that's something I'm going to do for all my future seminars.
Guys, do you remember that? We're talking about a BJJ event. We've had 2. And they're talking about the first one with Rolly Delgado and Tim Sled. And Tim showed a lot of really cool stuff. But I think Tim did a seminar first, and then Rolly did his. And then after that, Rolly and Tim started working together. And Tim was really excited because Rolly was just opening up and showing him so much of his ankle lock game. Rolly is doing a straight ankle lock. He's not showing heel hook. He's like, there's so many heel hooks going on. That's what's really popular. But Rolly, his straight ankle lock is so strong as far as like the way he applies it, the amount of pressure and I saw like Tim Sled like lit up, like he was super excited and happy. Like, I don't know this, but he was definitely getting more than a day's worth of training, talking and working with Rolly, and he was excited. And that was just kind of cool to see the two instructors, work back and forth and have a conversation and have some mat time and good training with each other.
But think about that, Byron. This is going back to all the stuff we said. They're open to it. They're in a good mood. They, you know what I mean? They're doing all the things we said. They're asking questions. They're the right training partners. And you have to be willing. Like we talked about Cody Carrillo, you have to be willing to be a good training partner and give and take, to help somebody get to that point. And that's what those two reminded me of. I remember watching that too. And, and I mean, it was both ways. I know Rolly, I was watching Tim work with Rolly on his leg drags too. And Rolly was the same way. He had the biggest smile on his face. And Tim had the biggest smile on his face teaching him. And it went back and forth. But it just made me, when I was watching those two guys, I was like, no wonder, Westside MMA and Tim Sled's students, they're so good. I mean, with instructors that, who open up to that breadth of knowledge. I mean, those guys are two of the most well-respected individuals around. They could have a closed mind and say, hey, I know it all, but they don't. They're out there learning like they look like a white belt. Just how happy they were soaking in that knowledge. They look like that guy, first week on the mat, getting to learn from a superstar.
Gary, that makes me kind of consider another wrinkle to this conversation that we didn't really think about. As an instructor or somebody that's teaching a seminar or somebody that owns a school, how can you increase the odds that your students will have epiphanies? And what you said that reminded me of that was Tim Sled, Rolly Delgado. Tim Sled, remember, he came in and he had an outline for notes that he handed everybody. And man, I was brilliant. I loved the way he taught that class. Rolly had a completely different approach, but one thing Rolly did, sometimes, like you're talking about an epiphany, a visual effect can make a world of difference. I don't know if you guys remember, but Rolly was talking about you get the ankle, you get it set up, and your weight's on your elbow. And if you move your elbow, you can see a divot there where your elbow was on the mat, and you put your shoulder in that divot. And man, that visual for me made a world of difference. So as an instructor, there are things you can do, I believe. It's just now occurring to me, but yeah, you can help your students have those epiphanies.
Joe, I love that. This is reminded, like I had this on my mind as far as not for the show, but like when I said 1 million seconds is 11 days and 1 billion seconds is 31 years.
31.7.
Okay, you found it. But like that's a powerful visual. That's a great teaching tool. If you're trying to teach someone the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire, and you'll remember that. You'll remember that 1 million is nowhere close to 1 billion. The divot is a powerful visual. It's a powerful teaching tool. It sounds like it's something insignificant, but if the student knows they move their elbow, that's where it's got to be. That's a great way to teach jiu-jitsu. And that's similar if you're teaching finance or whatever. You're trying to compare these numbers.
Yeah, because to finish that technique, you're not just arching your back, but you're rotating your torso. And that putting your shoulder in that divot, I mean, you can try and get me to understand about the rotation and all that stuff, and I'm not smart enough to. But you tell me to put my shoulder where my elbow was, I can get that.
Yeah.
And are you okay?
Yeah.
I heard some.
That's Joe's place,
sirens.
maybe.
Yeah, I'm in southeast Louisiana, guys, so the sirens are on me.
I was just hoping they weren't coming to take Byron away.
No, I've got the Renegade studio set up here, and I'm in the dark in the basement. Good. And
as long as you're safe.
Yeah, it's I've had to go into hiding. Anyway, I like the idea of being of a coach trying to create that month worth of training for as many students as possible. And that's maybe what we're trying to do when we teach a seminar, is to create that for the students. But I don't think that would be a great topic episode. I think we need to research that in order to make it have good content. I think we're studying that all the time as far as interviewing top level coaches and athletes and asking about training techniques, but it's a whole different level because we've all experienced the idea of training and getting, having these epiphanies, but teaching them is a whole different thing. And I think it's, the environment, the teaching styles, the students and the teacher match up. There's a lot to it, but that's a good idea, Joe. And I'll let that simmer, and hopefully maybe we'll come back to that sometime. So after your training, so we did before training, handful of nuts are good. During training, burn that energy that you used, that you got. No, after training, what would you be doing if you feel like you've had a great day, or maybe you're at that point where, like, maybe this is for you, maybe not. Maybe you go home and forget the wrist lock or the ankle lock or the Kimura, or maybe you take a few more seconds or minutes and try to make this fit in your game. What would you do after the class is over, at home or, on the drive home? What are you guys doing?
Hey, before we get to that, I want to back up just a second. You said you have a handful of nuts before training. You never have a handful of nuts while you're training?
Not on purpose, Joe.
See, Joe, he even said Gary because he thought that was me
That's
bringing
a
that
natural
question
instinct, yeah.
Yep.
Well played.
But no, Byron, back to your question. I think, I think there's a couple things. I think right when you're done rolling and, you're getting ready to, you're done being on the mats and you're getting ready to go home, maybe take a second to, have a notebook or, something like the Maroon app, which we've talked about. Something to write down some notes, so you don't forget it. I mean, I can think of so many times somebody's told me something, so many seminars I've been to, didn't write anything down and forgot it. And, that goes back to Tim Sled providing an outline and extra, a piece of paper with extra space on it. And I remember his exact words were for you to write notes on it. We're less apt to forget about that, if we do write it down. And then, you were talking about, you're in the car on the way home, maybe, have that, go through your head, think about what you did. And that goes back to, Joe's Myland, with Daniel Coyle, but, just replaying a lot of the stuff in your head. But I mean, you definitely want to be safe because you're driving. So you need to pay attention, to stoplights and stop signs and pedestrians and chickens crossing the road. Think about jiu-jitsu, think about what you learned, replay it in your head. Yeah.
So taking notes after class is great. And it reminds me, we're getting back to BJJBrick events. The very first event, our friend Andy Dickey came out and, he's in his 60s, great at jiu-jitsu, working hard. I think he's taking a little time off now, which when you're in your mid 60s, that's okay. But we had the event, and he kind of challenged me. He says, hey, I'm going to go home, and I'm going to type up my notes, and I'm going to send them to you, and you can do the same. And that was actually a really interesting experience for me. I think, a little bit, was under pressure to, type out my notes in a way that made sense to somebody else. It's almost like when you teach something, you get better at it. Well, when you got to type out your notes, I think that helps as well. And then I got to read his notes and take his notes as well. So I don't know if anybody else is going to do that. I don't know if it's a good idea or not.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it worked good for me. So That's something to consider. Is it like a review with your teammates or something along those lines?
Yeah. What I like is, you're writing your notes down, and you still may have forgot something or not wrote it out, the way that makes the most sense to you. You're trying to figure out how to do it. But then Andy sent you his notes, so you see his notes too. And maybe, the combination of your notes and his notes just makes it a little bit more clear. I think that's an incredible idea. That's a great we owe Andy for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, maybe we'll give him the next episode for free.
Yep, just go to the normal podcast app and it'll show right up, yep. Andy.
I know a lot of people listening right now are like, wait, I've got all of mine for free. What the heck are they doing to Andy?
Don't tell Andy. Yeah. But yeah, the notes are a good one. Reflection, as you drive, or maybe, I've had several times where somebody showed something in class. I tried it, got really close, or maybe it worked a couple times, but it didn't work as good as I thought it would. And then after class, spend it 2 or 3 more minutes, partner up with somebody, and say, "Hey, let me work this again," because it was close, but I couldn't quite finish it, and just polish it a little bit. That could have a big impact. You're still on the mats, but class is over, and you got close a couple times working on something, but you couldn't quite figure it out. Grab somebody who's good at it. Grab somebody who is a good teammate for you, and drill it a couple times and see if they get anything for you to work on.
Yeah, I've always said when it comes to seminars, one of the things that I think works really well is you go out of town, you go to a seminar, you go back to your gym, go into class early or stay late and get with one of your good training partners and say, "Hey, I just went to the seminar and I saw something that I think would benefit your game." And you show them that, or maybe you find somebody else and you say, "Hey, I saw this seminar. I'm still trying to work it out. Can I get some reps in with you?" So you share that information with them, and it brings it into your gym, but it also reinforces what you learned during the seminar.
Yeah, teaching is a good way to learn. So if you did that, if you traveled somewhere and you go to a seminar, you learn something, you come back, you teach it, man, it really helps your brain understand it and maintain it. Retain it, I guess, is better than maintain. Dang it. Oh, man. Okay. Well, anything else, guys, before I lose my mind?
Well, Byron, you're talking about retain and that, but I think you've provided enough entertainment on this episode today, so great job.
That's my favorite kind of end.
So this has been a great episode, but I just feel compelled to say one thing, is that you have to be aware of false epiphanies. Sometimes you're in a class and something just seems to click and you have success in the world with it, but it may have to do with the room that you're training in. It reminds me of the time that Gary thought he was getting really good at the guillotine, but then when he went to the adult class, it wasn't nearly as easy. So you got to be aware of that.
Well, what I had trouble with a little bit in the kids' class is they got small necks and my biceps are so big, it was really hard to close off. It was hard to close off the space, So I think that's what my problem was.
That didn't happen.
Well, it was
they were powering out of it, Gary, I believe.
If you've ever seen me, I got little skinny old arms. So
no, Gary's
I don't have big biceps. But I wish I did.
Oh man, I do like the caution of the false epiphany, and like this episode, we're the title of it is kind of catchy. You see these things online all the time. It's like, hey, this is the best way to do this, or this is gonna game changer, thing. That might be the case for you. It might be the case for somebody else. But And we've all had those feelings like, this is a big deal. And you know what? You tried it. You worked it. You tried to figure it out some more, and it just didn't fit your game the way you hoped it would. And that's normal training. That's going down the wrong road. And it's like, okay, let's keep trying. Let's try something else. That's okay.
But Byron, think about it. How many times did you learn something and you're like, hey, this doesn't really fit my game. Maybe I went down the wrong road.
3 times.
And okay, 3 times. But it seems like it always comes back. It'll always come back if you keep on that training path. And I've thought of stuff, that I was like, this isn't going to work for my game the first 2 times I was taught it. And then next thing you know, it's become a staple of my game. So, always keep an open mind. Right now you may not have the tools to make it work. But later on, depending on where your game's going, it may just fit in there perfectly. So, always keep an open mind on everything people teach you. And you may not have it in your tool bag right then and there, but, there's a good chance it'll be in your tool bag later on.
Well, if it's not in your tool bag, check in your tool basket. It might be over there.
Good point, Joe.
Yeah, and if you go to look for your tool basket and you find a tool fishing box, then you need to go home.
And if you're looking in your tool bag and you see a lot of your tools are gone, but there's some unsalted nuts in there, Byron had been around.
Yep. Hey, another. Okay, I got it. Another thing would have made it worse. Okay, guys, I really wanted to share this this thought we had in our private Facebook group from Chris, and so our private Facebook group is just that. It's a small collection of BjjBrick listeners. And we talk about stuff. Sometimes we make fun of Gary or me or Joe. Sometimes they're pretty serious topics, and somebody has something they want to talk about. Most of the people in the group are Patreon supporters, so they're people who listen to the podcast. They want to support us. They pitch in like $1 every episode, or there's different amounts, but that's the most common amount. And I'm mailing out 2 5-inch BjjBrick gi patches. One is the throwback patch, and one is the brand new amazing patch. And they also send out a sticker. So those are just tokens of appreciation for joining us on Patreon. But guys, what happened lately in our private Facebook group with this conversation? What was going on there, my friends?
I feel like you're setting us up.
No, I'm just trying to get somebody to so I don't have to. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
So basically, Chris Melendez, he posted in the private Facebook group, one thing jiu-jitsu has taught me for life is when you're under tons of pressure, always keep in mind to breathe and not panic, because there's always a window to change your outcome. Learn that no matter how hard the struggle is in the moment, when you see an opportunity present itself, learn from the struggle and enjoy the outcome. And, we always talk about jiu-jitsu not just on the mats, like for life. We can be under tons of pressure, like you were talking about, rolling with Matt and putting you under, some pressure on side control, or we could be under a lot of pressure at work. I know Joe, a couple months ago or a month and a half ago when the hurricane was coming, you were under a lot of pressure. And, always keep in mind, don't panic. And that goes back to, Joe, you were talking about safety, your safety drills you have on the boats all the time. And, one thing that really I thought about is, man, first of all, I want to be in a boat with Joe, because if something happens, Joe seems like a calm guy because he's done this all the time. He's not going to panic, and because I'm going to be the one who's going to panic. But, don't panic, breathe. And same thing, you're under that side control. I mean, it hurts. It's taking your breath away, but there's always that opportunity when that pressure goes up a little, pressure goes off a little bit. There's your time to breathe. There's your time to get the underhook. Maybe you can shuck, grab a single leg, tap that far knee, and move to side control. In life, maybe you fix, Joe, I don't even know the names of these things on the boats, but maybe it's
the
taking
paddle.
on water. Yeah, it's taking on water, and you get the bailer pump, or you bail the water out, or whatever.
I think it's called a bucket or a tool bag.
I don't know. It's whatever's in Joe's tool bag.
Just go to the poop deck, guys. Come on.
I knew he'd take the show there eventually, Joe.
But I really liked, what he was talking about, because, it's on the mat, it's in life, and in my opinion, it's more important stuff we're going to go through life. All the trials and tribulations we're going to go through in life. Don't panic. Breathe. We're gonna have a good outcome. I mean, it makes me think about the flooding I had. I mean, the flooding Joe had. And I mean, look where we're at right now. I mean, it was trials and tribulations, but I look at it that I realized that I have more friends and people that'll help out than I didn't know beforehand. Met some people who helped out. Joe, I know you had some great training partners that helped out, and I'm on the other side of it now, and I'm glad I didn't panic, and without even seeing this beforehand, I think I kind of did that stuff. I breathed, I didn't panic, and I changed the outcome.
Awesome. Gary, some thoughts on this that were sort of in a different direction, and then you talked about emergency response on the boats and some of the things I've talked about, and it reminded me that I try and be on our boats every week when they're having drills and participate in them and comment, and One of the things we talk about a lot is like if the boat actually sinks and you get in the life raft, you got to keep control of morale and all that kind of thing. And I tell guys, when somebody says, "Oh crap, we're all going to die," it's too late. You've already lost it. You've got to anticipate that there's going to be morale issues, that there's going to be panic issues, and you got to get ahead of them. It's kind of the thing when you're grappling. You know, when you get to that point, like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. I'm going to get suffocated here. You're already a little bit too late. You got to anticipate that this is going to happen. Your opponent's got good control. He's starting to put in the pressure. And then something in this thought, this actual quote from our Facebook a friend here was, there is always a window to change the outcome. And that's what I think you have to do is you have to, in jiu-jitsu, you have to calm yourself down and you have to look for that window. It's not always apparent where it is, but there is a means of escape, and you just have to calm yourself down and look for that.
Great point, Joe.
That's awesome, and I appreciate Chris on here. When I first read this, when Chris posted it in the private group, my first thought was, for an example of this, is just, I mean, talking about pressure is side control. And I remember teaching somebody, like, they showed me side control, like, how do I get out of this? And I was like, well, you're not going to get out of that. We're going to have to improve this first by getting your arms in position, by getting your hips angled correctly. So you're not going to escape. You're going to improve the position a couple of times. You're going to wiggle your left arm in. You're going to wiggle your right arm in. You're going to, get a frame built. You're going to get, your legs back in the game a little bit. There's a few steps, and then you get out. But if your arms are out of position and you're flat on your back and you're facing your face is being ground in by their shoulder, you're not going to get out of that. You need to wiggle out of that first, and then you can get out of side control. And I think that's kind of just that little bit of improvement. Keep working. Don't panic. Breathe. And the opportunity will be there. But you got to also create it sometimes.
So was this the same conversation we had where one of our Facebook friends commented about the improving your position by 1%?
Something like that, yeah. Or Gary improving 1% every time, or
it might be a different conversation. I think it's applicable that when you're stuck in a bad position, you're getting suffocated, and if you think this is where I ultimately want to be and that's your goal, the road's too long, it's too complicated, you can't really get there. But you think if I could just get 1%, 2%, 3%, just get a little more room to breathe, a little room to put a knee in, and that's how you'll get there. It's not going to be just it's not going to be an epiphany. It's going to be a journey.
Yeah.
But hey, I want to talk about epiphany real quick here. Byron, kind of like what you were talking about, side control. You wiggle your hips a little bit, you turn on your side, you get a frame. I've talked about this before. I always thought I was pretty good at getting down to side control, and I can always limp arm into the underhook, and I like playing the underhook game, and I would get out. But people have really been working on side control, got really good side control, and sooner or later I was having trouble getting out. And it sounds like I'm sucking up to Byron, but Byron was showing a little seminar on framing, and I was forgetting that step. I was getting, wiggling, a little bit. There's my 1%, getting up to my side, 2%, but I wasn't getting any more than 2% because I wasn't getting the frame. Frame's going to create a little space where I can go to 3%, and 3% may be enough to get me out. But, the epiphany I did have, another epiphany was, I had forgot about frames, and, it seems so basic, but I had got around from not having to use frames, and it was always working for me. But as people got better, it stopped working, and I needed to go back and totally forgot about it. But that was an epiphany day for me.
We said, we told Gary, you can come back to the show, but you got to say some nice stuff about me.
I mean, did you think about it? I've really said a couple of good things nice about you.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've really I don't think I've said anything. I mean, I've said a lot of good things about the epiphanies I've had with you, about, your hair, about how you look like Adam Sandler, and how you like to, have a couple handful of nuts a day. Yeah. I've said a lot of good things about you.
I appreciate it so much, Gary, and it's been a fun episode. I hope we've been helpful. That's that's the main thing. It's like jiu-jitsu. You want it to be enjoyable, but you do want to get something out of it too. So try to when you get back on the mats, try to make things line up better for you to where you have these big epiphany days more often. You can't make them happen every day. That doesn't work. But you have more of them. That's great. And some days, like the conversation by Chris, it's just like get a little bit better. You're not going to have these all the time. You just a little improvement is good. Don't panic. And hang in there for the long run. Both of these days are real. We've all experienced these days, both types, and just embrace both of them. And some days are rough on the mats, and some days are great. And stay on the mats, and you'll experience more of both. But you'll definitely get more good days. Guys, I've had a lot of fun. Next week we have Deontay Leon back on the show. He's on the list to compete at ADCC, and I'm excited to see him there. I'm planning on going out there, my friends. So if you're out at the event, send me a email, BjjBrick@gmail.com, or send a message through my Facebook thing if that's easier. And we'll get a little bit of chatting time, and it'd be good to see some of you guys there on at ADCC in Anaheim coming up. So that's the plan anyway. Excited about that, and excited to bring you guys the interview with Deontay Leon next week, my friends. Till then, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Man, how am I supposed to end this? I've had to do this 2 weeks in a row without Gary, and we were kind of lost without it. Yeah. I think what I'm going to say is train hard, train smart, get better, guys. We'll see you on the mats.
And don't forget to have a couple handfuls of nuts each morning.
It's a good breakfast. You know, you give me a hard time, but man, it's a good breakfast. Also, if
the best part of waking up.
I've also resorted to putting like this is real dark chocolate into the nuts, and that way.
So you like dark chocolate nuts?
No, it's healthier. It's supposed to have more antioxidants in it. But
so wait.
It's something sweet. I like sweet things, so I'm not getting the salty.
Are you going to mash these up? Is this going to be like chocolate salty balls?
I'm just too lazy to do that process for my breakfast, Joe. Keep this in the food category.
I'm telling you, Chef makes the best chocolate salty balls.
No, this is
put them in your mouth, man.
Chocolate salt.
I almost mentioned that I add chocolate to them, and I do add some dark chocolate, and it's really good. But I was like, man, they're gonna tear me apart for the rest of the episode. Yeah, that's the healthy stuff. That counts as like health food. It's not even candy. So yeah, that was definite free ammo for you guys to have. But it's real.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.